Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and it's day 21 in the Advent Calendar, and Wargaming have released a brand new Tier 7 Soviet heavy tank, the KV-122, and I'm going to answer the question, is it worth it? So as this is a new vehicle to World of Tanks, well, at least for the European server, Wargaming have done the right thing, and while there is a bundle available for €49.99, you can also buy the vehicle by itself for €23.20. This means that the bundle costs €26.79 more, but for that you get 8,250 gold, 15 times 5 experience missions, and also 30 personal reserves for 100% extra crew experience for 2 hours. Now when we take a look at how much 8,250 gold would cost, that would be €30, so effectively you're getting a couple of euros of gold for free, as well as all of those 15 times 5 experience missions and the 30 personal reserves. And so if you need the gold, then maybe the bundle is a good deal for you, but for most people you're going to want to buy the standard tank. So the KV-122 is practically identical to the appearance of the KV-85, apart from the vehicle is embellished with some logs down the side, barrels down the other, and there's even a bucket at the back of the turret. And already a lot of you veterans out there might be thinking that this is the same as the old KV-1S before it was nerfed. But just don't quite jump to conclusions yet. So let's compare the KV-122 to the standard Tier 7 Soviet heavy tank, the IS, the premium IS-2, which is obviously going to be a direct competitor with the KV-122, and also just for comparison the KV-85, which remember is a Tier 6 standard Soviet heavy tank, just to see how they match up. So immediately we notice that the KV-122 has worse DPM than the IS or the IS-2, firing just over 4.5 rounds a minute, while the IS and the IS-2 nearly hit 4.9 rounds per minute. But the KV-122 does have better aim time, 3.2 seconds compared to the 3.4 seconds of these vehicles, and it has slightly better dispersion when moving than the IS-2, and better turret dispersion as well than the IS and the IS-2. But on the other hand, the vehicle can't elevate the gun as much. Now the KV-122 has a great top speed limit of 42 kilometers an hour. That's fantastic for a heavy tank, better than the IS, the IS-2 and the KV-85. And its horsepower to ton ratio is better than the premium IS-2 and just worse than the IS, but it has better ground resistances which will more than make up for that, especially on medium terrain. Furthermore, the vehicle has better turret traverse and tank traverse than the other vehicles in this comparison. But here's where the bad news begins. While the turrets are pretty much identical on all of these vehicles, the hulls are far from identical, well at least for the Tier 7 comparison. The KV-122 has 75mm of frontal armor, 60 at the side and 60 at the rear. The IS has up to 120, 90 at the side and 60 at the rear, while the IS-2 still has 25 more millimeters of frontal protection and 30mm more side protection. And so what this means is when we compare the KV-22 when it's angling just like this, we can see that the 122mm gun is going to go through pretty much every part of the hull armor of this vehicle, with the front at this angle ranging between 76 and about 130mm of protection. That's not going to defend you from Tier 5 tanks, let alone Tier 9 tanks. And the whole of the side of the tank like this is pretty much 120 down to 80 on the top half of the vehicle. When we look at the IS when it angles pretty much like this, the armor goes up to 200mm down most of the side of the tank, while the lower plate ranges up to 170mm, and there's even an auto ricochet plate off the mid front. And even the upper front plate here is 156 at this amount of angling, but there is a hatch that is 128. The IS on the other hand does have this big weak point down the side. As we can see, it's angled, and so that means when an IS is angling like this against you, just try and shoot it in the mid plate and you should go through. But for when your shot deviates outside of this, the IS stands a good chance of bouncing all Tier 5 to 7 vehicles and even some Tier 8s and Tier 9s. It's what makes the IS so great that you can just go at 45 degrees and hope that they don't pen. And that certainly isn't going to happen on the KV-122. The vehicle also gets slightly less hit points than the IS and the IS-2, and its modules seem to be a little less healthy. But one little perk of the tank is it actually has the best view range at 360 meters compared to 350 on the IS and the IS-2. And so what we find here is the KV-122 doesn't have the raw DPM of the IS or the IS-2, but it has better gun handling, is much faster, but has drastically weaker hull armor, but a tiny little better view range. So while today is the first opportunity that at least the European and North American server has had to pick up the KV-122, it's actually been available on the Russian server for the last week, and so what better place to source some awesome replays? And you know what, this is going to make you laugh, guys. Look at this stereotypical name here. The Drunk Driver 33RU from the Russian server playing in his KV-122 here. It's absolutely hilarious considering I just came back from Moscow And yeah, some of the roads there, well, a little bit dodgy. And obviously the land of vodka bears and of course tanks as well, which is quite apt for this game, I guess. So I do like some of the modeling of the KV-122, as I mentioned earlier. The log down the side, the barrels, bags down this side as well, and a bucket. I think it's a very pretty looking tank. Better than the standard IS, but I don't think it's quite as good looking as the IS-2, the other premium Tier 7 Soviet heavy tank. Interestingly enough, that vehicle, with the same designation 432, was actually in the Kubinka Tank Museum. I've got some pictures of it. I'll try and show them to you guys later on in the vlog that I'm planning there. And yeah, I just think that having the bear down that vehicle, I think it is a touch above the KV-122. Now, a lot of you, you've probably seen some 122mm gameplay for Soviet tanks, right guys? And what are Soviet tanks great for with their 122mm? Well, number one, big alpha damage. 390 average damage with every single shell that hits the, well, penetrates the enemy team. And 175mm of penetration. It's not terrible, but yeah, it's not great at Tier 7 at least. But yeah, there you go, that Tier 5. That's the new Swedish medium tank, right? The M42 isn't feeling too happy about himself anymore, as he loses pretty much most of his hit points there. Do you know what? If you roll high with this gun, you one-shot pretty much all Tier 5 tanks that you can meet. It's just absolute brutal, this 122. But it is completely wild. It has got horrendous accuracy, and the bloom is quite substantial as well. But when it hits, it certainly hurts, shutting down a Leo on the enemy team. Wow, this guy is certainly taking it to the new Swedish medium tanks, hey? A T-150 tries to be able to escape towards the northeast, but he is punished. And one thing that's interesting is that T-150 isn't going to have that much worse DPM than the KV-122. Because remember, this tank does suffer. It has got lower DPM than the IS and the IS-2, which it does feel a little bit annoying when you're playing this tank. He comes around the corner. Will he two-shot the T-150? No, he doesn't, leaving him on 140. Hit 3 hit points there. And the the T-150 actually gave him a couple of good hits there, reducing his hit points now to 334. That's certainly not desirable. Not particularly incredible trades when you're losing so much health to Tier 6 heavy tanks. And really, I think that the IS or the IS-2, when they were angled at 45 degrees, such as the drunk driver was there, would have probably absorbed the shot into the hull armor. But then again, those tanks wouldn't be literally ducking and weaving and advancing so aggressively along the slope as quickly as the KV-122 is capable of. And I think that really is the strength of the tank. It has just incredible mobility for a premium heavy tank. A lot like, I guess, people are starting to get accustomed to on the Liberté or the Patriot, right? And it used to be the case that before those kind of tanks came in, wow, look at that Tier 5 French light tank, the ELC AMX, literally shut down in a single shot from this 122mm main armament. But yeah, it kind of used to be the case that the Soviet heavy tanks were the faster, really, of the heavies. Obviously, the French kind of change, especially towards the top end, but at least towards the mid-end, the M4 isn't really the fastest of vehicles. Okay, a casual 580 ammo rack there. You can see where these Soviet derp guns are, why they're so popular, right? Certainly not the most accurate, not the best aim time, but remember the KV-122 does have slightly better aim time and gun handling than the IS and also than the IS-2. But the hull armor does make it suffer for it. He has absolutely dominated a lot of vehicles, but whenever he's got hit, he has lost his health. And I did manage to play a few games in this vehicle on a test account today, just to get an overall feel of the gun handling, and just to see how it was. And the armor is absolutely garbage. It really is. On the KV-85, the hull armor can be pretty good when you're dealing with Tier 4, Tier 5, and sometimes even Tier 6 tanks. But the difference is this vehicle is a whole tier higher, with effectively hull armor that isn't really very good at Tier 6. And it's almost designed to be kind of Tier 5 hull armor, at least in my opinion, on the KV-85. So when you step up and you have to deal with the Tier 7 tanks, the Tier 8 tanks, and God forbid also the Tier 9 tanks, this thing just hemorrhages health. It really does. And so it starts to make me think, is this vehicle a medium tank? Is it a heavy tank? What is its purpose? What is it trying to achieve? Is it worth sacrificing probably the main strength of your heavy tank, i.e. the hull armor, to be able to gain a little bit extra gun handling and a tiny little bit extra view range, 360 rather than 350? Oh gosh, talk about accuracy and Soviet aim time there. This tank literally does troll the hell out of you. Every IS driver out there will know that unless you're firing at short to mid ranges, that the gun... Did he really manage to just critically hit that M12 there? That's rather unfortunate. Surely he's going to finish him off with the second shell. Will he roll low? No, he won't. There you go, 350. He would have to roll exceptionally low to kill that tank. And now he's up to 6 kills, 3,460 damage, quite around here. And it looks like the AMX-12T is AFK in the corner. So I think the drunk driver, 33, is going to go and pick up his snack. Well, he's going to certainly live up to his name here. Just check this out. This is actually quite hilarious. This is one of my favorite things about this replay. Not him shooting the AMX-12T, but just frankly that this guy, he fits every stereotype. What a way to take out the last tank of the game. Cracking result here for the drunk driver 33 RU. So awesome result here for the drunk driver. He gets his ace tanker in the KV-122, a high caliber and a top gun for the 4,060 damage that he dealt, 4 times what anyone else on his team was able to achieve, 7 kills, 1,523 base experience points, quite a few misses, and of those, quite a few unfortunate ricochets as you would expect with the poor accuracy of this tank, but he made a whopping profit, 95,000 credits profit. This thing does seem to make a decent amount of credits if you are dealing a load of damage. And you know what this replay really reminds me of? Pretty much every single game that you used to have in the KV-1S before it was nerfed. But the difference is, this isn't a tier 6 tank. Being a whole tier higher means that this vehicle is going to have to compete with tier 8 and tier 9 tanks. And I think the attributes that allow the IS and the IS-2 to be able to do that is the raw power and the hull armor to be able to brush aside lesser enemies that the KV-122 is simply not capable of. And so sure, if you love mid-tier Soviet heavy tanks, then maybe the KV-122 will be a good pickup for you. And if you're a tank collector, you probably already bought this and are watching this video to maybe pick up a few tricks. But for those of you who are thinking that the KV-122 will return the KV-85 to its former KV-1S glory, it's just really not quite the same at tier 7. And so while the KV-122 is certainly not a bad tank and a competent player is going to do very well in it, I just don't think it has any truly special features that deem it worthy of a purchase. And so hopefully you enjoyed this video, or maybe it was just useful. If it was, please consider giving it a like. It really helps the channel out. And let me know in the comments what you think about the KV-122. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.